Hey,
Hi.
it's so good to see you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, I can. I'm still figuring out um, Instagram Live and trying to not feel old. So,
Listen, you're here in good time. So everything else now is just details.
okay, that's good to hear.
You
Thank
look
you for having
lovely.
me. Thank
Thank you for
you.
saying yes to me.
I say yes. I will always say yes to you, irrespective of the question.
I like it. How's your day been?
It's been good. It's Friday, so that makes it even better. It's
I
the end
know,
of the
right?
week.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a good day. And yours?
Mine has been okay. I'm going to share with everybody that the highlight of my day was this 1 hour class today that Shagita taught. And halfway through it, I was just like, I could be eating fries. Why am I doing Why am I doing this to myself? But it was so good. I felt so great afterwards. So, thank you so much
I'm
for
so
that. And that,
glad.
that was the best part of my
Oh,
day. And then I'm sure this is going to try and upstage it.
I'm so glad to hear you say that because I really enjoyed the class. And it was so good to see you because usually you're in meetings at the time. So
Absolutely.
I'm very happy that you prioritized yourself and
I've
yeah,
learned I've
it's
learned well
always
from
good.
you.
But I do have to say that I've heard this many times where your mind goes to fries. That
Yeah, I
seems to
know
be
it's
your
it's my happy place.
go-to, like your go-to guilt food, or is it just like your
It's my
go-to
no,
comfort
so
food?
I used to think of fries. This is very funny that we're actually starting this live by talking about fries, but what's more on brand about me than talking about fries? I used to think about fries as my, like guilty food or just like comfort food, but I have come to acceptance that it's just my happy place. So let's say when I'm running or when I'm doing yoga and everything just hurts, I'm just like, yeah, at least I'll eat fries later. And honestly, it gives me so much strength, or when maybe I'm just wondering, why am I working out? I could be eating fries. So it's my happy place.
It seems to be. This
Yeah.
this many I've heard this many times, so but I'm glad to win out against fries. Like my yoga wins out against fries sometimes.
There
So
you go. Well, most times actually, most times. So.
good to hear.
So thanks to everybody who's joining us. I can see a couple of people joining. That's great. So I know it's Friday evening and we don't want to keep everyone here for a very long time. So we're going to get into it. And so I thought about introducing you and then I was like, what's the fun in that? Why not just let you introduce yourself and then just,
Oh,
repeat everything you say with more energy. So please introduce yourself, Sha.
thanks a lot, by the way.
Please.
I'm Shagita Gounden. Let me start with what I do, I guess. So I'm a computer engineer. I work at the SKA project with Betty, um, just in a different team. I'm working on the engineering team, and we're building a really big radio telescope. I've been working on the project for about 6 years now, and we are closing out on the design phase and moving into construction, so it's very exciting. I completed my MBA about a year ago. Yeah, wow, a year ago. And I'm also a yoga instructor, and I'm a South African, but I am living in the UK and I've been based here for about a little over 2 years now. What else? Is there anything?
That you're amazing, that you're a powerhouse, that you make me want to be a better person,
This is
you
why
know.
we're friends. This is why we're friends. Um,
Yes, so Sha, you talk about finishing your MBA, and what Sha is being too gracious to say is that she did her MBA at one of the best schools around. So she finished her MBA at Cambridge, and I kind of want us to start there, if that's okay, because I know that I was actually recently helping someone apply for grad school,
okay.
and that process takes out a lot from you. And I think sometimes with business school, maybe it's slightly different from, because my experience is law school. And so how was the process before Cambridge for you? How was the application? How was the identifying Cambridge? How was that for you?
Yeah, that's a good place to start. But something to say about the application process is that for me, that's where I started learning the my whole learning journey really began just during the application process. And it wasn't sort of an automatic decision, like, let me just go to Cambridge. It wasn't a straight line from deciding to do my MBA to going to pick the school. But I knew I wanted to do my MBA for a while now, but I waited until I had a decent amount of work experience, which turned out for me in any way for the best. I'm really glad I waited, and I'm glad I had that work experience because it really helps put things into context. But we can talk about that more later if you want. So when I decided, okay, this is something I want to pursue, I spoke to my manager at the time, who is also somewhat of a mentor to me as well. And this is where having people who believe in you more than you believe in yourself is really important. Because he would always say, what are your plans? What can we do to get you to where you need to be? And I thought, I don't really have any plans. I'm quite happy just here and very comfortable. And um, that's when I realized I should probably start doing something to get out of this deep comfort zone that I was in. And so I told him I'm thinking about applying for my MBA and probably studying it part-time. And at the time, I was still based in South Africa, so I was considering UCT, and I was based in Cape Town, so it made sense. It was very local. And he said, well, that sounds great, but you should maybe be thinking a little bit bigger than that. UCT is fine. It's a wonderful institution. It's amazing. Um, but he was saying, you go to the UK a lot for work. I was already going to Cambridge quite often to work with the astronomy team there. We were finalizing the design of an element. And then so he didn't directly say Cambridge, but he said you should be targeting schools like Cambridge or Oxford or maybe in the States. And my first reaction to that was, no, that's not going to happen. There's too much distance between where I am now to not just physical distance, but it wasn't even a consideration. It just seemed too far out and too far beyond reach. But then what made a difference was I had spent the summer the year before in Cambridge. I was based there for about 6 weeks, and I was working out this um, design aspect that was really tripping us up. And while I was there, I would run around because I'm a runner, and I would run in the mornings, and I'd run past King's College, which, if you know Cambridge, it's this really beautiful college, like most of the colleges are, but King's is pretty special. And I would run past there and I would think, wow, it must be so amazing to be able to study here or to go here. And what a dream that would be. And I didn't really think much more of it, and I probably just kept running. And so something about what he said when he was like my manager, when he said, think bigger, target some top 10 schools. And then I thought, Cambridge would be a pretty good place to target.
Yeah.
And then it's sort of, the way I guess the way people get incepted, like Inception, it just sort of, it's the seed that gets planted, and then at the time you just ignore it. But then with time, it starts to develop into something that
Absolutely.
you can't really ignore.
Yeah.
So I checked the deadline and I looked into, so my approach was just take it one step at a time. Go and find out what you need to do first. Like, what do you need to apply, what the process is like. So I went on the website, checked the deadline, and the deadline was about a month for the next year.
Yeah.
And that was the last round. So there are different stages. It's always better if you apply in the first round because then you're eligible for bursaries and scholarships and things like that. But of course, me being me, I waited until the final round. And yeah, so I said, take it one step at a time. prepare the application.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, when you prepare with your friend and when you helped your friend with the application, it's a pretty intense process. You've got to uh, prove your competency in several things. You have to get all the, it's a very administrative process, but there are also things where you have to motivate why you'd be a good candidate and write some essays and really think deeply about why you want to do this and whether or not it would be useful to you. And I did that, and within a few weeks or so, and because it was so close to the final deadline, I found out pretty quickly and was really happy when they said, okay, we're happy to give you a place. And it was a very exciting thing. And I remember being very, very happy about it. And that didn't really last very long because now came the actual, like, putting it into action. Okay, you got in, and now what? And then
Yeah.
that's a whole other phase. So, yeah, I'm sorry, it
So
was a
you
very
talked
long-winded
about,
answer,
no, no,
but
no. I like it. I like the detail. And you talked about a couple of things. And I think one of my favorite things that you said just now is to take it a step at a time. Because what I've found is sometimes when you open the website and you're trying to apply, there's 3,000 things. And if you let your mind just race, intimidating, and then you might end up not doing it at all. So I think, taking it a step at a time is a really good place to start. Is a really good place to start. Sorry, I thought I'd lost you for a sec. It's a really good place to
oh,
start.
yeah.
And so that's number one. So you've kind of glossed through the application, and I'm imagining that the people who'd want to kind of hear a bit more about that. So what kind of okay, let's start from the essays. There's stuff you have to say. There's like you have to write what do they call it? Letters of motivation. I think they call them different things in different unis. And a lot of people struggle with selling themselves, right? A lot of people struggle with just sitting down and saying, listen, I'm amazing because of da 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 da. So did you learn anything through that process for you? And if you did, what was it?
Okay, that's a good question because yes, the application process takes a bit of time, and there also the other bad thing about applying in the final round is that you need reference letters from people that you work with, and then you also need a reference letter from somebody who's managed you, who is your supervisor in some way. So you need to give them adequate time to prepare some kind of reference letter. And that all happens through the portal. So they just do that and send it straight to the university. Um, and yeah, choosing the people who would give you that letter is actually not as easy as you think it might be because you are not privy to what they're going to say. It happens completely confidentially. And what helps is that if you just speak to them beforehand and talk about what you would like, and obviously you're not influencing what they say in any way. You're just saying, this is what I want to do. This is why I'm doing it. Would you be happy to give me a reference? And fortunately, I had some really good people who evidently gave me good recommendations and good references. Um, and I guess again, it comes back to having a good, a good professional network, which is something to think about if you're applying for an MBA. You ideally want an already kind of established professional network, which is why I think, in my case, studying for the MBA later on in my career was a lot more beneficial to me. I think I got a lot more value out of it than if I had started straight out of uni.
Yeah.
And and then the personal essays, if I think about, I'm trying to think about what the topics were, but it's usually what they're trying to see is that you are driven, that you're self-motivated, that you are committed to this, to the significant investment of time and obviously money, but but that you're sort of passionate about continuously learning, developing yourself. And so you talk about the challenges you faced. And I think it helps to just be authentic, just be yourself and be honest. And that's really the approach I took. I just um, wanted to make it about my own personal stories and the things that I've faced. So it really helps to keep it in a narrative form,
Yeah.
not just like listing these are the characteristics that I think make me ideal. Like it really helps if you employ a narrative, like you draw from your own experience and you talk about what you've been through or a particular challenge that you've overcome. And it doesn't have to be academic and it also doesn't have to be professional. It could be something that you've experienced in your personal life. And don't be afraid to be honest and authentic and also to show some vulnerability if that is what comes naturally to you.
Yeah. So I like how you finished that by saying if that's what comes naturally to you, because I was recently following a conversation on Twitter, which is most times a bad reference for anything, but there was a question of whether it's usually some sort of trauma Olympics when you're applying for like grad school or when you're applying for like scholarships. I think it mostly applies to scholarships, right? That people maybe want you to ponder or like maybe to create scenarios that maybe you didn't necessarily go through, because if you just say I've had an amazing life, then they're like, oh yeah, but then you're boring, why should you give me a scholarship? So I like that you quantified it and say to be vulnerable if that's what naturally comes to you, because I mean you shouldn't have to feel like you have to create things or scenarios that to get acceptance.
Yeah, that's a good point because there was something about it when I approached the essays and I would write things from my personal life and the challenges that I faced. And I thought maybe this is too schmaltzy. Like maybe it's emotionally manipulative. But then you've got to sort of check yourself and say, is this authentic? Is this something that really had an impact on you? And even if, and I don't think it's a case of being overly emotional or vulnerable or, it's not about, it doesn't mean that you've had to have gone through something traumatic or very difficult in your life, but we've all had challenges and we've all experienced instances where we've had to overcome and we've had to display resilience. And I think it's really just it's worthwhile to just check in with yourself when you're writing these essays and ask, am I being authentic? And I think a good way to gauge that is how comfortable you feel with writing these things. So as you're writing, and that's why it's good to give yourself a little bit more time with these essays, like read through the questions, read through what's being asked, and just think about it a little bit and then just forget about it and then come back to it a day later or a day or two later. So it really has time to sit with you. You have time to reflect. But it shouldn't feel performative. It should feel natural because I have this feeling that comes through with the way people express themselves in the writing.
Yeah.
And yeah, just I know it's trite and I know people say it all the time, but just really being yourself will bring you to the right things that
Yeah.
are good for you.
I like that. I like that a lot. So you've written amazing essays, you put it into Cambridge, and what's that, what was that like for you? And particularly because I know that part of that was done, um, actually all of that was done as you worked, a pretty demanding job as well. So, what was that like for you?
Yeah, so they did before we started, and one of the first things they said to us on the first day of this amazing orientation week that happens is that it is a time demanding. It's a very significant investment of your time. And juggling work and school is not a trivial exercise. And because it was an executive course, everybody on the course was working. So it was a part-time experience. And depending on who I talk to, I either say, yeah, it was really difficult and it was really taxing, but I know that I absolutely loved it. And it didn't feel like, yes, there were times where there were crunch times where I was doing something at work and I had to sort of submit an assignment or But it was just the best time. It was the right kind of busy. It
Mm.
was the kind of stress where you feel like you are actually growing, you're learning something, not stress for stress sake that is just exhausting and draining. It's the kind of stress and the kind of experience that gave back energy as opposed to taking it away, even though you were doing more things.
Yeah.
And then we had to go to Cambridge once every month for a weekend. So, and have class like in-person classes. And that was just, that felt really like a complete escape, like to get away from work, to get away from everything else. And some of the people on some of my peers and the people on the course, they would say it was actually nice just to get some of time for themselves, like away from family, and not in a bad way, just to be just to be completely immersed in this Cambridge
Yeah.
experience and to feel like a student, go to classes, um, uh, socialize with, I had to think about the word socialize because I haven't done it in so long, socialize with the people on your course and just have this very immersive experience. And those weekends were amazing. But then once I stopped and once we finished, which was just before the UK went into lockdown, and once I stopped, I realized how much time I suddenly had, and I think it was also this like latent exhaustion that kicked in, and I just felt exhausted after everything was done. But during the course, it was a truly transformative experience, and it didn't feel like I was giving up anything or sacrificing things.
Yeah. I like that. I feel like you're the only person I'll ever talk to who'll be so crazy about school, but that's okay too. But I like it, right? Because it kind of brings a bit of variety. Because a lot of people take school as a chore, but you're clearly too much of a nerd to do that. And I
You know
absolutely
me.
like that. I absolutely like that. Okay, so what did that experience do for you? What would you say your Cambridge experience did for you?
So going into the experience, I didn't really have an expectation of what it would be like after I was done. I knew that it would give me exposure to a different skill set. So you'd learn about little things about, no, not little things, but just an overview of everything to do with business and the way the world worked, really. And from being in an engineering silo to just learning about everything else, it was just a very expansive view of everything else. And one of the great things about doing it part time was that you were able to apply things that you'd learned within your work environment, or you'd learn about something and then suddenly work would take on a different dimension, like you'd suddenly
Yeah.
notice different like things like team dynamics, and you'd notice how managers in your own company were behaving and acting, and you think and you'd have a context to put what you have learned against. And I thought that was quite dynamic, and it made for a far richer learning experience. But then once I completed the MBA, it was so a friend of mine who'd done an MBA before, he said that there are like different cycles of the MBA and different emotional it's emotional life cycle. And once you finish, you're very happy, but then you get what he called an MBA depression. Like suddenly it's as if you've just, there's this big hole because it's all gone. You don't have the weekends and you're not a student anymore. And you notice the swaths of time that you suddenly have.
Yeah.
And you're also left with this like, well, what now kind of feeling. And it didn't help that this coincided with the beginning of a pandemic. So that was that was a that was kind of emotional because I wasn't expecting to just like leave my job and go into something else as soon as I finished the MBA. But I did think that it would give me a lot more options and a lot more different paths to potentially explore. And it did. It really did. But
Yeah.
it almost felt like it's the burden of choice because now you really could go anywhere and there are a lot more paths, and finding what you really want to do and what you want to direct your energy and your attention to is really difficult.
Yeah.
But then there was also the sense of the world closing up and yeah, things coming to a halt in a way, and everything being in flux. So it was a little bit tumultuous, very tumultuous for everyone. But I mostly used that time and that period immediately following finishing school just to decompress. Like the MBA was 20 months of just going to school and doing assignments, and when you're in it, it's wonderful and it's great. But then as soon as you stop, you realize actually it was quite tiring. And so I use those moments just to take a break, and didn't really make any hard and fast decisions just yet. Yeah, just came to terms with finishing and just being comfortable with that. Because one of the things I also tend to do is, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but sometimes you identify goals and you work and you're so excited about them and you've got all this enthusiasm and you put in everything to them. You get to them and you finish it, and it should be something that you should celebrate and
Yeah.
pause. But then for me, it's like, well, on to the next thing.
Yeah. What now?
And one of my friends from school, she said, we should really be just reflecting that we just finished an MBA at Cambridge, and 20 months ago, that was just a dream for a lot of us. And even before that, that wasn't even something I even really dreamt about. So she was just also really wise in saying, I think it's just time to stop, take a breath, and just enjoy it and appreciate it.
Yeah, I like that because a lot of times you finish something you really wanted to do, but then you're like, okay, so what do we do now? And then what do we do now? And then you never really quite pause and just say, a few years ago, I wanted to do all these things, right? That I've actually now done. How amazing is that? And so I like that you say that there's need to kind of create space with intention to celebrate yourself and to celebrate the achievements you've made and stuff like that. I think that's understated, and I think that it's really important.
Do you find that you do that too?
Oh
Because
yeah,
I feel like you also do that. Yeah.
no, without a doubt. And I think an example that came to my mind, and it's actually, recently I've talked about it with my mom, is that I've not had a party in the sense of it for any of my graduations. So I have 2 degrees and a postgraduate diploma, and I finish and I'm like, leave me alone. And the one time actually that my brother and some of my closest friends kind of got together and threw me a surprise party, I spent like 2 days after that just wondering, that was actually really nice, but it was also kind of strange because what are we doing? But yeah, so I think it's a learning curve for me as well in that respect, that sometimes it's okay to kind of just pause and acknowledge the things you've been able to accomplish before then kind of running to the next thing.
Absolutely. And for me, I actually had to be forced to do it. Like the world had to shut down. Um, and then yeah, that was the only time I just sort of took a pause and took a break with it. But and you're right, when I had graduated like with undergrad and things, and it was such a slog. Studying engineering is still the hardest thing I've ever done. And I just sort of blew past the graduation. I attended because my parents, it was, I guess, important to my parents. And I don't even remember the day. I just remember, I just want to get this over with.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's kind of a pity because it was very special. And I think it's important that you have people in your life who remind you to do that and to take a break. But I will not be doing this with the Cambridge graduation. So our graduation got put on hold, and it's just recently that they've announced that we can graduate in the summer.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, so I have to coordinate with my class because I want to do it together.
Yeah.
But I plan on just truly
Going
celebrating
all
and
out.
like going, as the kids call it, if they're still calling it this, extra. I'm gonna be so extra
I
for
like how you decided
graduation.
you're old. I like how you decided that you're now at a place in your life where you can say, as the kids call it.
Yeah, I am. And I'm proud of this
You own it. I
because
like it.
it looks just so stressful to be a kid right now or a young person right now. So,
The,
yeah.
yeah, I like it. I like it. I like that you're now learning and that you're actually deliberately and intentionally going to, go all out for your graduation. And I think you've earned it. And after everything the world has kind of been through in the last couple of months, we're going to take the joy wherever we find it. So you've talked about something that I want to kind of explore a little bit. And I think it's also because it's not talked about a lot. It's just the mental toll a lot of this ambition chasing gets on people, if you might call it that. And so I have quite a few type A people in my life. And one of the things you observe with people like that is a lot of times it's just from one thing to the other, and without too much deliberate intention to take care of yourself, of your wellness, of your mental health, and all that stuff. So, what's and I know I asked this to you because I know that you're very intentional with your life. You just don't kind of go through life with your eyes closed. So, what does wellness look like for you? And through your MBA, and even post your MBA, when the world was shutting down and all that stuff, and just to ask all the questions is, why is then wellness important? Why do you think that no matter what you're doing in life, or no matter what kind of professional and personal ambitions and goals you're chasing, that wellness has to have a place in all that?
Yeah, that's a really good question because as we've seen now, wellness is taking a lot. I mean, it's always been important, but it's definitely been brought into sharper focus because the strain that people are taking is very palpable. And for me, wellness has been, I think it's just shifted and changed through time. And it doesn't necessarily mean exercising because I've I've been a distance runner for a really long time, and my approach to running could hardly be described as wellness way at the beginning. When I first started running, it was really just beating yourself into submission, which I've learned now is actually not healthy and it's not wellness.
Yeah. So I'm just going to
Um,
interrupt you to point out the fact that, when you talk about long distance running, you're talking about, so to me, when you talk about long distance running, you're talking about 10 kilometers. But, when Shah talks about long distance running, she's talking about a marathon, casually running a 12-kilometer run on her lunchtime, and running the ultra marathon in South Africa and stuff like that. So yeah, I can see how you're saying that could easily turn into beating yourself into submission.
it really was, and I still run distance, but it's just changed. The way I approach it is different. It's not beating myself up. It's knowing when to rest. It's knowing when to hold back. It's knowing when to sit on the couch, and that takes time. But I think with wellness, it's really about finding an outlet, some way that you can give yourself back the energy that everything else in your life takes out from you. Because it does, whether you're working, whether you're studying, even in our personal relationships, it still is take, even if they're great and wonderful relationships, they still take off us. And I think for me, wellness has always been about giving myself back some energy. I'm an introvert, so any kind of interaction with another person, as lovely as people are, and as much as I love my friends and my family, I still need that time alone where I can just be in my own head, where I can focus on feeling energized, where I can focus on feeling strong, and the things I do that contribute to this wellness, this idea of wellness, make me feel more confident, more strong, and just more grounded. Grounding is a really important thing for me. Just feeling connected to the present because I'm also, I would say, an anxious person. I worry a lot about things that haven't really happened yet, or yeah, so my wellness and the things that I do that constitute wellness try and bring me back to the present. They
Yeah.
make me feel a lot less anxious. They make me feel a lot more connected and in turn more connected to the people around me. I can be a better partner. I can be a better friend. I can be a better sister and all of those things to the people I love and care about. And I can show up for people way better if I'm taking care of myself. Actually,
Absolutely.
one of the best things I've heard about wellness was something you said to me. You once said to me that wellness was meeting yourself where you are. And yeah, so this is, you've said this to me a while ago, and it's something that kind of stuck with me. And it really is. It's not about doing something to get you to a better you or doing something to push yourself to something else, because we have so many other avenues in our lives where we're pushing
That.
and where we can beat ourselves up into submission and we can push more and go beyond our limits and things like that. But um, when you said it's about meeting yourself where you are, it's really about finding out what you need, connecting with yourself, with exactly where you are, and bringing some grace and compassion to how you are feeling, and not about beating yourself up.
Yeah, I was actually just writing down something you've said when I turned to my laptop, that it's finding a way to give back to yourself all the energy that life takes from you. I also really like that you talk about exercise, and that just because you're working out, it does not necessarily amount to wellness, because it could also just be, beating yourself into submission. And, and as much as exercise is good for everybody and everybody should be moving, you also have to understand, your process and what it is that you're doing with that. I like that. I like that a lot. So why do you think it's important, especially, for people who are chasing seemingly hardcore things, right? Because a lot of times, well, I don't know about the culture you grew up in, but in the culture I grew up in, sometimes, it's tough, suck it up, and why are you being so sensitive and stuff like that. So why do you think it's important that we're very intentional with, our wellness and stuff?
Because you're a human being, and you can only push so much before you eventually either get sick, because your body, there's this great book called Your Body Keeps the Score, and it's about how your body physically responds to trauma, mental trauma, physical, well, obviously physical trauma, but there's a very real biological response to stress.
Yeah.
And that's not just a theory, that's been scientifically proven. So just from that aspect, and just to be healthy, to not be sick, that's really important. But also, and this is why wellness is really about doing something that, not as a maintenance plan or because it's the right thing to do or because it's recommended by doctors or things like that, but that's why it's so important to do something that you just love to do.
Absolutely.
That's not something that is a chore. So I think that the misconception with some types of exercises is that it's something you have to do, or the misconception about wellness is like, well, it's something that's routine, it's something that's part of your schedule. You've got to sort of force yourself to do it. And sometimes, even with the things you love, you do have to have that motivation sometimes. There are many times when I don't feel like going for a run, or I don't feel like, but once you do it, it feels really great. But it's to make it sustainable, to make it something that truly, um, that you make part of your life, is to choose something that you love to do, so that it isn't sort of the separate thing that you're doing to maintain your health and maintain, which you are doing anyway, but it's just something that feels really good. And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be exercise. It could be like knitting or meditation, or you don't have to be overly physical, and you can be walking in some place really beautiful, just
Absolutely.
something that really makes you feel connected and makes you feel happy. Just, yeah, really
Yeah.
simple.
Because there's enough stuff in the world that takes away joy, right? So you need to find things that then bring back the joy to you. I mean, and as you say, because you're human and because you need this stuff. So I noticed that, as we always do, we're now talking a bit longer than we intended to. But I have a question, actually. Someone has sent me a question by text, so I'm just going to
Oh,
ask that, and then I'm also going to someone. When you were talking about celebrating milestones, someone did say that party is a must, and I just wanted to kind of honor and recognize that and say that some of us are still learning. And so the question was on funding for the MBA process, because I think sometimes that can be very prohibitive for people. And so, just some thoughts around that. And I know that with your executive program, that could have been slightly different from someone who went to a bit of the more traditional grad school routes and stuff. But, just some thoughts on raising funding or getting funding for graduate programs.
Yeah, that's a really good question because that was one of the moments where I thought, oh, maybe this is not gonna happen. Because when you see the cost and like, oh, congratulations, you've got into Cambridge. Yes, and then you read a little bit further down, like, here's what you need. And you have to sort of pay like a deposit to secure your place. And then you pay, there are different sort of payment plans depending on what school you're going to. And but this is why applying early is super important to get access to scholarships and bursaries and things. But that being said, as someone who did not apply early, um, I I definitely paused once I found out what kind of it is a significant investment of time and money. And I also checked other schools. So I also compared prices and things for other schools. And Cambridge was a lot more reasonable than schools in the States.
Mm.
But then I was always going to go to some place in the UK because of the convenience of work and the fact that I was going to be there for work anyway. But I would say that it, this is where the application process already sort of made me reframe and evaluate the things I actually value. Um, while it is a lot of money, especially if you're South African and you're doing the currency conversion,
Yeah.
it made me rethink how I think about money and the utility of money. And money is useful when it's actively being used, else it doesn't have any use. And I know as a graduate from a business school, I should articulate this better, but it made me reframe how I think about money. And while it was my schooling was probably the most expensive purchase I've made, I do not regret it. I think it is an investment in myself, while and in my education. And while I was studying, while I was in school and going to classes and doing the assignments, even in the stressful times, I didn't at any point think like, this is not worth the amount of money. um, if I could go back to making that decision, making that investment, I would choose it every day. And but again, it's something you have to sort of think about and reframe for yourself and think about whether it gels with your values. It is definitely a big investment. So really just take time to think about what you'd like to get from it. It's definitely, even though I didn't have an expectation about what I wanted for my MBA, I did make sure that it was in line with my general career trajectory. Like it made sense. I knew that it was going to be a useful investment,
Yeah.
professionally and personally. But, and maybe the thing to say is don't let the cost of it stop you, because there are definitely ways to make it happen. And there's also, you can do an MBA at any time. There's no such thing as being too old to learn. There were people on my course who were in their late 40s and 50s, and it just brings more experience. And that's the other thing I learned. It's like you're never too old to learn, to go back to school, to be a student again. It's a really invigorating thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, lately I've been thinking that one of the things I'd like to see is like a scholarship program for people who decide to go back to school a little later in their lives, because I think that would just be amazing and to encourage more people who maybe for various reasons could not do it a bit early in their lives to still be able to do it. Okay, so my take from your response was one, just do it early because then you get a chance for more funding opportunities, especially if you're trying to get scholarships and bursaries. And then also, I don't think a lot of people know this, but it's possible to get a payment plan with universities that you don't have to
Um,
cough up
yeah, not not the
100%.
whole amount. And there's also like Prodigy Finance is a company that was started by MBA students to help fund postgraduate education, and they offer a lot of scholarships and bursaries. They're also pretty good. I think it's called Prodigy.
I'll look it up and then maybe, yeah, I've just international student loans and stuff. Okay, I'll look it up and then maybe I'll leave a link on the description of this thing for anybody who might be
Yeah,
wanting to.
Prodigy Finance. It was actually started by MBA students or MBA grads.
Nice, I like it. Yeah. Okay, so there's ways. So basically the summary of that little segment is just don't let as much as cost prohibitive sometimes it could get. There's ways, and there's, even though sometimes it may take a little bit of time, even maybe you may have to defer to raise a bit more money and stuff, it's all surmountable.
Yes, I would say so for me personally. But again, it's a personal decision. Be intentional about why you want to do the MBA. Make sure it makes sense for you, that you're motivated, because again, apart from being an investment of money, it's also a significant investment of time, and it will take a toll on your professional life and also on your personal relationships too. So make sure the
Yeah,
people in your life are also supporting you.
absolutely, absolutely. And if you have someone in your life who's in grad school, then also make sure you're supporting them because they need all the
Exactly.
love they can get.
Yeah. And
All right.
be prepared to cancel on a lot of things with friends. So I know that you and I missed so many. Every time you suggested we should do something, or whenever there was some event happening at work, I missed
That,
all the work
yeah,
Christmas parties.
you're
Like,
like,
no, I
sorry.
can't do this. I'm in school, or I have something due, something like that. So, but
Yeah. I mean,
because I
but
have
from
great
what
friends like you, they will be there when you're done.
Absolutely. And from what I'm hearing you say is that you could do it all over again if you had to start, you could do it all over again. Okay. So I'm going to say thank you very much for your time this evening. I know it's a Friday evening, so I don't take it for granted that you said yes to spending a bit of that with me. And I'm going to say that I found
Always.
this very useful. And as always, as I talk to you, I get to learn a little bit about you as well, which is always amazing. And that I know we'll do this again soon. So thank you. And I'm sure, if I get any more questions or anything around that, I'll just channel them to you. And then we can talk
Absolutely.
a bit of information about all this stuff, as we post the video.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's always great talking with you.
Always, always. So I hope you
I'll
have a
chat.
fantastic weekend. And thanks to everyone who's hung out with us and stayed with us. And
Thank
this
you.
is to be on our Instagram in case you missed bits and bits of it.
Thanks. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too. Thank you.
Bye.